ViewSonic, the heart of your system.
I'm Neil Walder for Kit Guru, here with Gigabyte at CES. So we start with the very white Aorus logo, and then we move on to RGB galore. RGB motherboard, Z390 Aorus Master, we're familiar with that. And then we have here an RGB system, essentially. If we just ignore, static. If we ignore the liquid cooler, we have RGB RAM, we have an RGB SSD, PCI Express, spec card up here for that. That's a new product. There's also M.2 SSDs in the same family. So you're getting a whole suite of products from Gigabyte. Moving along the line, this is really to illustrate that at the extreme high end of motherboards, and this is a brutally expensive board that's somewhere around about the $799 mark, absolutely colossally expensive, with Gigabyte's own water block. They've told us that they actually machined that themselves, not just their own design, they actually manufactured it themselves, so it's not EKWB or whatever. So that's the top of the tree, then you move down to extreme, and then you move on down through the stack, and at the very bottom you've got ultra durable. Interesting and good to see. Moving on to graphics. So here we have the GeForce RTX 2080 Extreme Waterfalls WB for water block, but it is also RGB, and it's blooming heavy actually. I'm just going to say that. That's a solid piece of work. More graphics cards, RTX 2080, RTX 2070, but RTX 2060 is what's happening at CES. Now, before CES, there were reports that Gigabyte had registered some 30 or 40 different SKUs of RTX 2060, all manner of memory, 3, 4, 6 gigabyte, GDDR5, GDDR6, all sorts, different coolers. This is the product stack from Gigabyte, and it's what you'd expect to see. So we have the ITX 6 gigabyte, we've got the WindForce OC 6 gigabyte, we've got the OC 6 gigabyte, and up there the gaming OC 6 gigabyte. This is the stack. All the other products appear to be non-existent. They're basically names in a registration file somewhere. So this is the reality of RTX 2060 at Gigabyte, which is 1/10 of what we've kind of been led to believe might be the case. Moving along, peripherals, headset, keyboard, mouse, RGB. Bryony, come on in, give them a close-up. And then we move into the built system. Again, RGB SSD is familiar. New cooler, that's a great big fella. RGB memory, Optane memory. As we'll see in just a moment, Gigabyte is working very closely with Intel. Oh, and we've got the RGB 2.0. That's actually a beta of the software, I believe. You can head to Gigabyte's website and you can download a beta of the latest software should you feel brave and want to dabble with the new features. Move past the special systems. One of these is Mod My Mods. We like Mod My Mods. It's this one here. Let's give Mod My Mods a little bit of more exposure. And go past these systems. This, I have to say, that this system here does pretty much show off Gigabyte RGB to the absolute nth degree. It's absolutely fabulous. You can tell that the EKWB cooling hardware is plumbed into the motherboard in terms of RGB, so the RGB is all coming from Gigabyte control. Even though it's a mixture of their own hardware plus EKWB. Laptops, Aero 15X9. Some little logos here which are quite significant. So all Intel inside in red, blue and green. And then also Microsoft Azure AI. This is one of these you're either going to love it or hate it moments. The all Intel inside means that the hardware inside is from Intel. Now, processor chipset, obviously, if you think back to Centrino many years ago. In addition, this is news to me, Killer Nick from Rivet Networks. Rivet is now apparently very closely working with Intel. I don't believe they're actually owned by Intel, but Killer counts as all Intel hardware. Also Optane and Intel SSD I believe the 760 model, means the hardware inside this, Intel throughout. And there are two actual themes that Gigabyte has told us about. The first is all Intel inside. The other is that they're going to consistently use components from the same manufacturers where they can. So all the panels from one manufacturer, they're going to use Samsung memory wherever they can, and so on and so forth, which actually would seem to be a much easier way of handling the supply chain. But going back to this Aero 15X X9, below the all Intel inside, we have this Microsoft Azure AI. And this is the bit where you are either going to love it or hate it. The idea is that the machine learns how you use your software and whether it basically stresses the CPU, GPU, or a mix of both. And it feeds the information off to the Azure cloud. They ask your permission, they tell us. You can turn it off any time you like, they tell us, and it does not take data. It wants to know how you're using the software. And the consequence is that it can then basically dynamically adjust the power to your CPU or your GPU to essentially manage the power envelope, and thus, they tell us, increase performance. They're talking in the region of up to 10% performance boost. Obviously, if you're video editing, that's mainly graphics. If you're gaming, that might be mainly CPU, or that depends, of course. So this is not dynamically adjusted within a particular game or app. It's dynamically adjusted depending on which piece of software you've just loaded. So it puts some settings in at that point. Anyway, that seems to me to raise many more questions than it delivers answers, and it's certainly interesting. Also, this is a Gigabyte initiative. Although it's using the Azure cloud, Gigabyte has initiated this. Therefore, we don't expect to see it from other manufacturers in the short term. It might happen in the longer term. Right now, this is a Gigabyte thing, not a Microsoft thing, although it's in association with Microsoft. Very, very interesting. Moving down the line, Aero 15X, Aero 15Y9. This fella here, I'm liking the look of a lot. When I reviewed the Aero 15X last year, 2018, it was very good indeed. These two laptops are looking like they're out of a very similar mold. Previously, Gigabyte laptops have been marginal in terms of performance. They were nothing bad, they were nothing brilliant. The 15X knocked it out of the park, only by a few percent here and there, but it was the cream of the crop when it came to laptops of this form factor that I reviewed last year. Deeply impressive, and the new version is available imminently, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing how that behaves. So these two laptops, yes, looking forward to that. And then further along, we got the new Aorus laptop. This is a gaming laptop, and it's interesting in the sense that it's actually quite chunky. Lots of breaks the thing. Tethered. Lots of ventilation for intake. I'll just put it down before I want to do more damage. The thing is that in the past, Aorus, they used to have a thing where they were really emphasizing SLI graphics for maximum performance. That thankfully has gone by the wayside. Now they've got away from the idea of it has to be the thinnest laptop you can possibly get. The emphasis is on performance. That requires cooling. That strikes me as a very sensible thing to do. So the Aorus laptop is significantly more chunky than the Aero laptop, and that is flipping around what we expect to see from Gigabyte, and yet it makes perfect sense. A very sensible move in my opinion. One final thing over here, before we leave this room that is, some cases from a company, American company called System 76. Not familiar with these, they are US only, apparently they're looking to expand into Canada, so they're not going to be coming to Europe anytime soon, but they are built in America from raw materials, so flat sheet steel and wood. So they look interesting. We know next to nothing about them, first time we're seeing them, but it only seems right and proper to give them a bit of coverage, and clearly these systems have been built with Gigabyte hardware inside. And as we're literally about to leave the room, I've walked into Bob from Rivet Networks, who's now going to tell me who he is and what's going on inside this Aorus laptop. Go for it, Bob.
Hi there. I'm with Rivet Networks. We make killer networking products, and one of our biggest partners is Gigabyte. And what we have here behind us is an Aorus notebook, and it has inside it our killer Ethernet and our killer Wi-Fi products. Probably the most exciting thing for Gigabyte customers is that Gigabyte has decided to put the 1550, which is our latest Wi-Fi based on an Intel chipset, and it has it can do gigabit Wi-Fi, and from a theoretical standpoint, it could do 1.7 gigs of throughput. But that's, as you know, theoretical. In real world, with the right router, it can do 1.2 gigabits of throughput in real world testing. So it's, if you ever want to get in your lab with the right router, it's something that's pretty achievable. So
Excellent, thank you, Bob. Absolutely perfect timing. And I'm so glad that even he manages to confuse gigabyte and gigabit in the same sentence out
I
loud.
do it all the time, and then it's only appropriate that I do that in the Gigabyte booth. So
Appreciate it, thank you very much.
take care. Thank you.
We're finishing up in a dim room with a whole series of these monitors, the AD27QD. Monitor names, what is it with model codes? They're absolutely terrible. However, all the monitors in this room are the same monitor. Matthew from KitGuru is reviewing one of these monitors, and that's going to be going out very soon, so there's no point in me going through the details. Plus, frankly, I can't remember them. The list of acronyms and specs is just unbelievable. The key thing is this is a 1440 monitor, 144 hertz, 10-bit IPS. Now, I must confess, after conversations I had yesterday, I didn't actually realize that that combination of features was even possible. Also, the price is mind-bogglingly low. We're talking in the territory of $600. What it's going to come to in the UK, we're not quite clear. But this is absolutely just, well, it's either going to be the best monitor ever, or it's got some awful feature that we don't know about yet that's going to kill it. But right now I'm feeling deadly optimistic about this. And these features here, these have to be sort of seen and heard to be believed. Features to do with noise cancellation and such like. So team players in online games don't deafen. You can play music at one end and the other person doesn't over their headset, they don't hear it, and so on and so forth. It's quite bizarre. The demos have been quite extraordinary, rackety as anything. And naturally, RGB, honestly, the least interesting aspect of this monitor. Even the stand, the way the power is built into the stand and such like, the rise fall, he says, and the whole thing takes off. Portrait landscape. The RGB is the least interesting aspect of this monitor, so only correct is on the back of it, because for me, the 144 hertz refresh rate, 10-bit IPS, I'm liking the look of this a great deal. I've got my fingers crossed that Matthew's review basically confirms that it's as good as it appears at first sight. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't, give it a thumbs down. We still like you nonetheless. Do click the bell button. We'll tell you about new videos as they become available. I'm Leo Warder for KitGuru, here with Gigabyte and Aorus at CES in Las Vegas.